Hello, movie nerds, and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, the podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about The Power. This is a new thriller television series that just dropped, I think last night or tonight. There are 3 available episodes. I have watched the first 2, and I have to say, I am very much enjoying this one. This is right up my alley. It kind of reminds me, sort of in a twisted way, of like growing up watching the X-Men cartoons when I was a kid. This very much is giving me like in that realm of Marvel superheroes, but modern-ish day and with some very interesting specifics. So for anyone that is not familiar with The Power, the premise of this show, it takes place kind of all over the world. So we've got some UK peeps, we've got some people in Russia, I believe, we have some in the United States, we have some in Africa, and basically what it does is sort of bounce around and give you the perspective of a lot of different characters. It kind of reminds me very much of Sense8, if anyone remembers that show. And basically the entire premise is that at a certain point, all of the teenage girls start to get electrical powers, like they have electricity that just shows up in their bodies. So they're starting fires, they're electrocuting people on accident. And the thing about it is that none of the kids really understand what's going on. So they're sort of learning about their own powers sort of as the audience is watching it happen. There are quite a few instances that just sort of show you how they are sort of learning their abilities, learning how to use their abilities, learning where it comes from. I've already checked at like the critic reviews for this television show, and it seems like the critics are not really feeling this one, which really surprises me because I find it incredibly unique, incredibly interesting. It just seems like a heck of a lot of fun. You know, this is a premise and a storyline that I feel like can carry for quite a long time. There is like this underlying vibe of the world is about to really change. And so it kind of shows you how it starts out, and it gives you like a really brief glimpse of what the world looks like in the future. And I have a feeling just from what they've shown on here that Toni Collette's character is going to play a very major role in leading the girls forward, like the girls that have this special power. Toni Collette is a mayor in this show, and you very much get the vibe that it's like a man's world. She has to kind of play to the rules that she doesn't necessarily agree with, and it's kind of like dimming her shine, if you will. But you do get some like glimpses of her, like I said, in the future, like after these teenage girls have already had their power, they've established and changed some different things. It's sort of like wrecking the world to rebuild it in a way that is more pro-woman, I think, is where this is going. I don't think it necessarily goes like, I don't think that they've done it in a way that's like, oh, women should be in power and should rule. It just sort of seems like a lot of these stories are very specific scenarios where you can see why that would be important to these girls in particular. Like one of them I believe was like adopted, but she very much was definitely being treated very poorly. There are some hints at some things that may have happened to her that would have been, in my opinion, extremely inappropriate. And so she kind of gets her vengeance, if you will, that way. There is one girl who plays a character, Roxy, in like the UK. It's British based. They're in London, I believe. And she is kind of like the daughter of someone who obviously has a lot of money and a lot of influence, but she's sort of treated like the trash sort of daughter. You know, her mom seems to be not very wealthy. The mom and dad are not married anymore. So it's like a lot of these sort of stories that come up where you're like, yeah, I can see why that particular teenage girl would want or need, in some cases, a power like this to change the dynamic of it and give them the ability to defend themselves if necessary, or really kind of stand out and be in control of their own lives. So I don't really look at this television show as like women should be in charge, brah. It really sort of feels more like, at least from the start, the first 2 episodes, it feels more like there seems to be a lot of corruption. A lot of the stories seem to be centered around, with the exception of one of the teenage characters, centered around girls that are definitely in situations that are sort of dangerous and or oppressive in some way. And so it makes sense then that they would have these powers and play a significant role in kind of changing how the world runs, you know. But I do get the feeling that obviously from the glimpse at the beginning that we are going to see a very, very big change in the way that the world runs overall, and see sort of what would happen in real life if teenage girls were given the ability to like electrocute someone to death. What would happen? You have to imagine like teenage girls are not necessarily the ones that I feel like there's a reason why the X-Men are adults. We'll just go there because you have to imagine like teenage girls that are not necessarily in control of their emotions at all times now have the ability to severely hurt other people. And so I can see the show, I don't know exactly what direction it's going to take, but I can see the show sort of pointing out how dangerous that could be. But I'm interested to sort of see where like Toni Collette's character comes in, because I have a feeling she sort of becomes that adult female figure that just kind of takes these girls and points them in certain directions, if that makes sense. So I think it would really kind of come down to sort of who was leading the girls to see where the destruction would happen or how that power would be utilized. It very much has the feel of like a very dark X-Men or like Sense8 in a very dark way. But I am really enjoying it so far. I think so far all of the characters are really interesting. The plot lines of each of the characters are really interesting. Like there aren't specific characters that stand out as being more interesting or me wanting to see more of that than any of the other ones. Like they're very equally footed. And I'm definitely interested to see kind of where this show goes and how they play with what's going on here. I just find it fascinating. I love that sort of mutant, like they're not mutants, you know. I don't think that that's the point. It is definitely kind of explains it more as like this is a natural phenomenon that just happens to be coming out. But I love that kind of, you know, Sense8 born with special abilities kind of stuff. So it's definitely hooked me. I would highly recommend, if you are looking for something to watch, checking out The Power. I was not interested in this one when I first saw the poster. I do not think that their poster for the television show does them any justice, because looking at it, I was like, nah, I don't want to watch that. And then kind of turned it on just to sort of see what was going on. And I do very much enjoy it. So I wish that they had come up with like a poster that maybe was a little bit more dynamic, I guess, or a little bit more eye-catching to kind of draw you in, because I think that this is a show that would be easily overlooked if you didn't know what was going on here. So those are my thoughts on The Power. I would love to hear yours if you guys check out this television show. Subscribe if you want to join the movie nerd family. You can find me on Instagram at Cinematic Sarcastic Podcast. You can now also find some of my early episodes on YouTube, and please do like, share, and subscribe over there. And I hope to see you in the next episode.